One cool fall evening, me and a few of my friends were bored, and someone suggested that we go ding-dong ditching. I was eager to agree, up for a little bit of excitement. We all wore dark clothing so we wouldn't be recognized, and decided to target the neighborhood where my friend, who I'll call Tom, lived in. There were a lot of nice houses there, and some security cameras, so we had to be careful not to show our faces when we approached. We successfully hit a couple of houses, but we hadn't gotten a funny reaction yet. Most people just looked around and then went back into their houses. But then Tom suggested that we try it on this house at the end of the street. He said a pretty creepy guy lived there that was rumored to have spent a lot of time in jail. We figured he would be the type of person to get mad, and we wanted to see his reaction. Tom thought it would be funny if he rang the doorbell on the front door and I knocked on the back door at the same time. It would confuse the guy so that he didn't know what door to run to. Tom made his way to the front door while I walked into the backyard. The two other guys that were with us were hiding behind the bushes near the front of the house. Tom told me that he would text me right as he was about to ring the doorbell so I could knock at the same time. I took in my surroundings. It was partially a wooded area, so I would be able to run for cover pretty easily after I finished knocking. I got the go-ahead from Tom, so I approached the door and knocked on it as hard as I could about 3 times. Then I turned around and dashed into the yard where I hid behind a tall pine tree. I texted Tom to tell him that I had done what I was supposed to do, then stuck my phone back in my pocket while I stared intently at the back door, waiting for it to open. At first, nothing happened. I felt a vibration in my pocket and knew the text message was most likely from Tom. I grabbed my phone and held it close to my chest so that the white from the screen wouldn't alert anyone of my presence. I dimmed my screen and clicked open the text from Tom, which said that nothing was happening on his end. I began to type back that nothing was happening over here either, when all of a sudden I heard a deep voice from behind me ask what in the heck I was doing. I whirled around and saw a man only a few paces behind me. He wore a cut-off white tank top that exposed his bulging muscles and many tattoos. He looked at me with a look of pure rage in his eyes, while he twirled a metal baseball bat in the air. He took a step closer to me, and I took off running at full speed, screaming at my friends to do the same. By the time I had reached the front yard, I could see them already taking off down the block as fast as they could. I thought the man was going to give up eventually and just turn around and go home, but instead he continued to chase me block after block. I did everything I could to think of to throw him off my tail by cutting through people's yards and zigzagging across the street. When I realized I had finally lost him, I headed back to Tom's house where all my friends were waiting. We could barely believe what had happened and all agreed that it would be our last night ever ding-dong ditching. One night I was sleeping over at a friend's house. We'll call her Jill. Her parents were away that night, so we had the whole house to ourselves. It was getting dark out, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do that night. Jill suggested that we go ding-dong ditching. At first, I kind of laughed at the idea and told her that we were way too old to be playing those kinds of games. But she was persistent and told me that it would probably be a funny experience we could later look back on. I eventually agreed, and we went up to her bedroom to get dressed in clothing that we hoped would make us blend in pretty well. We both had black sweatshirts on with the hoods pulled up and wore black leggings. We were already giggling at ourselves as we walked about our plans for the night. Jill told me that there was a crazy lady a couple of streets over who would always watch her from the window while she was walking her dog. She said that when she made eye contact with the woman, she would simply hide behind the drapes. We both decided that she would be our first ding-dong ditch target. Because it had been Jill's idea to go ding-dong ditching to begin with, she agreed to be the first one to ring the doorbell while I hid in some shrubbery nearby. I watched carefully as she approached the front door, rang the doorbell a good 5 or 6 times, and then sprinted to where I was kneeling to hide alongside me. We both watched as a minute or so went by before the door swung open and a woman wearing a nightgown came out. She was clutching a screeching cat as she called out, asking who had rung her doorbell. Both Jill and I had our hands over our mouths to keep from laughing aloud. When the woman went back inside, Jill told me that she wanted to try doing it for a second time. I warned her not to because by this point the woman was probably watching out of a window and would catch her. She assured me that it would be fine and crept back to the front door. This time, she only got in 1 or 2 rings before the door swung open. The same woman we had seen earlier emerged. Before Jill could even begin to make a run for it, the woman clamped her hand down on Jill's wrist. Jill was screaming for help as the woman began pulling her into the house. Without taking the time to think, I sprinted towards Jill, screaming at the woman to let her go. When I got to her, I grabbed her free hand and tugged as hard as I could until she was able to free herself. Jill and I then took off running as fast as we could until we got back to Jill's house. We went inside and were sure to lock every single door and window when we got there. The woman didn't end up coming to bother us that night, but Jill still won't walk anywhere near her street and is still scared of her trying to get revenge on us. I was with a group of guys having a cookout when someone suggested the idea of going ding-dong ditching. It was one of my closest friends who suggested it. For privacy reasons, I'll call him Joe. There was this kid that lived in Joe's neighborhood, we'll call him Grant, that we went to school with. Grant was, by nature, everything you would think of when you think of a teacher's pet. You know that kid that reminds the teacher of that pop quiz they nearly forgot about? That was Grant. He was also the kid that had turned Joe in when he was caught glancing over at another girl's test during the last math exam. It was because of Grant that Joe got a 0 on the test and got in trouble with the school board and his parents for cheating. All of us could understand Joe's frustration and how he wanted to get revenge on Grant for being such a jerk. We all agreed that we would go together to go ding-dong ditch Grant's house. With any luck, it would be him who answered the door. We made our way to the house, already laughing about how funny it would be if Grant answered the door. Joe had brought a few cartons of eggs we had just bought from the store and instructed a few of us to throw them towards the front porch if Grant answered the door. We had agreed that we were eager to help our friend in his revenge mission. When we got to the house, we immediately noticed some tall bushes that were pretty dense and would be the perfect hiding place for the rest of us while Joe took on the task of ringing the doorbell. It, of course, needed to be Joe who was the one to ring the doorbell because he was the one out of all of us that had any real drama with Grant. 2 of my buddies were armed with the open egg cartons. They were ready to throw them, and I had my iPhone camera turned on and facing the house with the hope of capturing what I was sure was going to be a hilarious encounter. Joe approached the door with plenty of confidence. He definitely looked like he didn't think there was any chance of him getting caught. I could see him smirking as he got to the front steps and reached out to the broad wooden door. I was shocked to watch Joe ring the doorbell not once or twice, but at least a good 7 or 8 times. To my amazement, it was Grant that opened the door. He was wearing Star Wars pajamas and couldn't have looked any more confused. He looked around before eventually going back into the house, not noticing Joe behind a nearby tree. My friends hadn't been brave enough to throw the eggs when Grant opened the door, so they launched a few at the cars that were parked in the driveway. I think only a few had been thrown when the front door swung back open. This time it was Grant's dad, and he was holding a shotgun. We all took off running at the same time as we heard shots ringing out into the night. We all continued running until we eventually made it back to the cookout, lucky to all still be in one piece. The whole incident was definitely an important lesson for us, and we never messed with Grant after that again. It turns out that his dad had actually been tried for an attempted murder in the past, but got off on a technicality. Who knows what he was capable of? I hope we never find out. Have you ever been ding-dong ditching? Drop a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.